this movie is like, you mentioned like Hunsaker has this like center of gravity around which like all the sleaze and evil of New York City just sort of revolves around. And like in this movie, he really is like a Mephistopheles. Like he is like Satan incarnate, and Manhattan at night is just the inferno. And he is like, in the frozen lake at the center of it is just J.J. Hunsaker, the most powerful columnist in America, based on Walter Winchell. And did you know that actually Walter Winchell, as we'll see in the plot of this movie, Walter Winchell worked with J. Edgar Hoover to get to commit his daughter to an insane asylum and get her fiance deported from the country.
Well, that's sick. That's just like, wow, that's just like in that movie, Sweet Smell of Success.
Well, it's all sort of like semi-based on Walter Winchell, but I guess my big headlines for Sweet Smell of Success are stylized dialogue, menace, homoerotic sadism.
Yes. The homoeroticism is really crazy because like the main character it's technically not Burt Lancaster. It's like Tony Curtis is
Sidney Falco.
Yeah, Sidney Falco, publicist to the not stars. But basically Tony Curtis is the point of view character that we're with. And we get to see him like trying to climb this horrible ladder that
the
he can't
golden
help
ladder,
but,
as he calls J.J. Hunsaker. He says he's the golden ladder to everywhere I want to go.
Mm-hmm. And it's really like heartbreaking to see this guy who we kind of come to like, even though because it's like Tony Curtis, very charismatic, like very. I always think whenever I hear Tony Curtis's voice, I always think he sounds like a cartoon alley cat for some reason. And like, oh, hey, come on, give me a piece of that fish bone, come on. And he's just so lovable and likable, and you see like glimpses of like what could be of him like taking a stand and being principled and being like a good person at certain points in the movie, and then but JJ Hudsucker is always right there to fucking slam him back down, pull him back down to hell.
Well, I'm glad we're doing a Sweet Smell of Success because obviously this is the Burt Lancaster episode, but we can have sort of a mini Tony Curtis episode as well.
Yes,
because Tony Curtis deserves his own episode, and this was like he was sort of a heartthrob before this movie. This was, I guess, like his first like more serious movie. He'd actually just started another movie with Burt Lancaster called Trapeze,
which I've seen on TCM one time. It's not. It's fun. It's
well,
fine.
I mean, it's like sort of based on,
yeah,
based on like Burt Lancaster's own experience,
his circus life,
the life of the circus. Now, as I don't mean to like disagree with you, but what I will say about Tony Curtis in this movie, like the thing to me that makes this such an impressive performance, next to Burt Lancaster, who's like stunning, is that as Sidney Falco, you're right. Like there's an impish quality to Tony Curtis that like you can't help but melt your heart. What I really appreciate about Sidney Falco is that does not give you an inch in terms of like ever letting you like this character. Like they're like JJ and Sydney are both like they're like in this bizarre like tryst between each other for who can be the most evil person on the planet. Yeah, and I mean it's JJ because he has all the power in their relationship, and Sydney is his like little Renfield,
his idea man.
Yeah,
kind of.
So the movie begins, and we are introduced to the life of sleazy press agent Sidney Falco, played by Tony Curtis. He like lives in his office in the Manhattan's theater district. He's got his bed in his office. His door just like has his name taped onto it.
Yeah.
And he's this like hyper ambitious little striver who works as like press agent. It seems like it's like sort of like I guess they're just called PR people now.
Yeah.
But like back in the day, like this was one rung above being a pimp, basically.
Yeah.
And in this movie, he like literally does become a pimp at certain points in it. But like this is a truly disreputable profession. I mean, how everyone views Sidney Falco's character in this movie is how everyone should view anyone in the field of PR or communications
today
now. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, they treat him like dirt, and rightfully so, honestly. And he gets to his office and immediately starts abusing his poor secretary, who it's very funny because it looks like an office until he opens the door and you do see like bedroom, a queen size bed in there, and he's like, "All right, time to get started on my day." And then his like secretary's like, "You forgot your coat. Don't forget your coat. You'll catch a cold." And he's like, "Shut up, you dumb bitch. I'm not paying a tip for the coat check."
He's like, "Well, I mean, Go handing out tips at coat checks all night.
Kill yourself.
But we get a taste of the and like really like a lot of the power of this movie is in the screenplay, which is just like a lot of writers regard this movie as like the best movie ever. Like for instance, Vince Gilligan, who created Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. The second and third episodes of Breaking Bad are called "The Cat's in the Bag" and "The Bag's in the River," which is a direct quote from this movie. But like this movie's use of like very stylized dialogue that just like that just cuts like a razor and
Biting,
it's just, yeah. And like for instance, you mentioned how evil he is to his secretary. He goes, "You ought to know me by now, Sally. I'm nice to people when it pays me to be nice, so don't expect me to do it in my own office." And it goes, "It makes me feel bad when Mr. Hunsucker hurts you." And then he goes, "But JJ, he's the golden ladder to all the places I want to go." And he sort of the dilemma that Sidney faces at the beginning of this movie is that he is like he has this relationship with JJ.
Is
Hunsucker.
that he's in love with JJ Hunsucker?
Yeah. But JJ is giving him the cold shoulder. He's freezing
Giving him the
out.
high hat. As,
Giving him the high hat,
Mm-hmm.
the cold shoulder, the high hat, and certainly not the glad hand.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, all of Sidney's items are being frozen out of JJ's column because, like he depends. Like he furnishes him with little items about like this jazz band who hired me, and then like to get in JJ's column, it's just like, hey, if you're looking to see a good jazz band, check out so and so. But he's being frozen out because he's been tasked before the movie begun with breaking up the relationship between JJ Hunsucker's sister and a jazz musician that he doesn't approve of, named Steve Dallas, who's like the whitest jazz man
I was like,
history.
I'm like, this is some of the worst casting I've ever seen. This guy looks like a total, what's his name is
Steve Dallas.
The actor though.
The actor. I don't know the actor.
Merle something Merle or something.
Merle the jazz man.
Yeah, Merle the jazz man. But the jazz band, this is interesting. I don't know if you know this. The band is the Chico Hamilton Quartet, which you might know from a song called Conquistadors, which is sampled famously in the opening theme of the movie Ocean's 11. It's the dun 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 dun. That's like this band in this movie. And I remember like the first time I saw this, I was like, whoa, those are the Ocean's 11 guys. That's so cool.
So basically, like, before the movie even begins, we're like, JJ is completely off screen. But yeah, as you said, Hesse, he really like dominates the action of like the first 20, 30 minutes of this movie. Because like everyone, even without like him being physically present, is sort of dancing to his tune. And we're already like given a sort of a glimpse into this kind of sadomasochistic relationship between Sidney Falco and JJ Hunsucker. We're like, it's one of favors for a favor, but this one involves a personal favor involving JJ's sister. And like, this is really what dominates the plot of the movie is JJ's obsession with his sister. And for a movie made in 1957, this is why I said like JJ Hunsucker is the only villain in the American like film canon that I can come close to comparing to how evil he is John Huston's Noah Cross in Chinatown.
Yeah.
And that's no accident because incest is a huge theme of this movie as well.
Yeah, this movie is sexually deranged. I would describe it as. It's truly like wild.
And like it's like in Chinatown the incest is explicit because that movie was made in the 70s. But in 1957 they do everything but make it explicit that like JJ has designs on his sister.
For the full episode,
any man being with his
subscribe
sister
at
is not good enough for his sister
patreon.com/Chapo
because there's only
Trap
one
House.
man good enough for Susie Hunsucker, which is JJ himself.
Yeah, and it's really incredible. Like towards the end, Tony Curtis touches the sister to like save her from killing herself, basically. Not to spoil anything, but I guess we'll get there. And he's just so mad at I guess he does just the
For the
concept
full
of him
episode,
touching
subscribe
the
at
sister is very-
patreon.com/Chapo
it just gets
Trap
him
House.
so mad that he's like ready to kill him.
This is
Literally tries to kill him because
Yeah.
of it.
And like there's this whole thing where JJ has like absolute contempt for Sidney because he's a grubby, dirty little man who
He's
does
a
all-
beta.
Yeah, like but he does all of JJ's dirty deeds for him, and he regards that as amoral.
For the full
and the
episode,
kind of guy who
subscribe at
really, as you said,
patreon.com/Chapo Trap House.